G'day expats, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode. As always, I'm joined with my co-host, Jeremy Harper. Good morning, mate. How are you?
Good, thanks, James. How are we going?
Good, mate. We've come back. We've had the Easter long weekend and we're straight back into the thick of it with the hottest news over the last couple of weeks, even the last week, to be honest. There's been so much going on. We are fast approaching a budget coming
Yep.
out in only a couple of weeks, I think 33 days. And it's anyone's guess, but definitely some concerns for investors at the moment in terms of what they are starting to model and drip feed out to the broader market right now. So I thought, what a great time to just unpack it, given some recent updates we've seen in only the last 2 weeks.
Yes. We talked about this earlier about this is the big budget that Chalmers has been setting himself up for, bit of policy
Mm.
shift.
Mhm.
But obviously what's happened globally has shifted things with inflation and interest rates, and it seems to be that they are potentially softening what was what they'll drip feed into the market at the start of the year. But we
Mm.
can talk through some of the key changes that, again, that there's been some modelling done now, and again,
Yep.
nothing's official yet, and we have to wait until budget night. But in terms of the CGT discount, it does seem they've put forward some options, and it has a feeling that the current CGT discount at the moment, which is 50%, looks like that they may be reducing or reviewing that down to 33%.
Yeah, the way it's swinging at the moment, especially after that report that was tabled in that Senate inquiry, it seems like they are going to remove, or they're leaning towards removing that 50% CG discount. And then I think they're modeling a lot of different options at the moment, but it'll come back probably 33%, 25%. Um, that's where it's trending at the moment. But even then, there's rumors swirling that they might even try and tamper with negative gearing as well.
Yes, correct. So they've done some modelling around this where perhaps that they will cap the interest deductions or the negative gearing to 2 properties per person.
Mm,
Again, we have to see the detail. I've got a lot of questions around who does that apply to? Does that apply to properties in your personal name? You know, is that look at properties that are jointly held or held in individual names? If it's held in a trust, if it's held in a company, how do those rules apply? And even just thinking about, which a lot of people as a strategy look at things like debt recycling. Perhaps
mm,
if they're doing that against their personal residence property, how does that apply? Is this purely only for negative gearing towards investment property? But if you're debt
mm.
recycling against a property for other purposes, does this rule also apply? So they're looking at the negative gearing, but I still think we're obviously very light on the details around that at this stage.
Yeah, I think causing more questions, unfortunately, at the moment, and that's pretty common. No clarity. They announce it in a budget and then work out the details with the years to come. Um, there will be some sort of grandfathering, I would assume, but from what we've seen recently, they've kind of said there wouldn't be any grandfathering. It's sort of going to apply to all existing properties, but it's again, we're reading from the tea leaves here. I really got to unpack what they're going to put in the budget.
Yep.
Um, I think looking at some of the reports that have come out, like the coalition issued that report where they were mainly trying to drill down on the whole housing affordability issue. It's not a tax problem, it's a supply problem. So they need to go back and have a look at the industry, construction industry, and remove a lot of the red tape. So faster approval, so more houses can be built quicker. Um, that probably isn't going to happen anytime
Yep.
soon. So what is the quickest way is, oh, well, we'll just play with the taxes, CGT, negative gearing, capping deductions at a maximum of 2 investment properties per person. I mean, most people these days that hold and invest in investment properties, usually when they're getting to 2 to 3 in their own name, they'll start using structures because their serviceability or the way that they, I guess, are captured, from a serviceability aspect, they need to look at a trust or a company or something. So that might not actually have too much of an impact in terms of the effects. The debt recycling is pretty important for a lot of our clients that are back in Australia, Aussie tax residents. Debt recycling is a really powerful tool, pulling equity out, putting into
Yep.
shares, using the dividends to wind down the debt a little bit and just keep pulling it out. So you're slowly transitioning your bad debt, being your main residence debt, the non-deductible debt, into good debt, being investment debt. But at the same time, you're building another asset over, say, a 10, 15, 20-year period, which becomes a terrific retirement asset. So that's a little bit scary, just because that's a really powerful tool, especially for high income earners in Australia, the debt recycling concept. Um, I would say, and I think you put it on another episode, about the change being probably phased in over a number of years.
Yes, that's correct. Yep. And I think the other thing to note is all these changes or proposed changes are obviously at a federal level. And so you take from one, you give to the other. So if you're making these changes around, let's say potentially around, you know, capital gains tax, if that changes the behavior of investors, so their strategy is no longer buy and sell, it's buy and hold.
Mm.
So on the flip side, that means less transactions, less
Yep.
stamp duty. So potentially the ATO may be collecting more revenue on a federal level, but what does that do on a state level from a stamp duty point of view and at that tax base? So
Hurts it.
it's very much short-term thinking really, because there's only a pie, and if they're taking a certain amount out of one piece of it, they're going to have to give it back on the other end.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, what would you say, like, knowing what's coming, are we seeing a bit of a run on the property market right now in terms of buyer interest, or and everyone trying to buy before what could be proposed because of the grandfathering rules? I don't know if you're seeing any of that at the moment. There's, been a lot of investors trying to climb into the market, or do you think the market's sort of stagnated a little bit because of the uncertainty?
I think I said this on an earlier in the year. It's feeling like there's a bit of uncertainty, and potentially part of that's from some of those rate increases coming through. But I don't
Yep.
think that's the major piece. I think the major driver around it is it's feeling like we're going to like another election year where there's uncertainty around who's going to be in power and what are the rules going to be at the end of the year. So this is such a big budget coming through. And so
Yeah.
people are sort of a bit uncertain, so they're sort of sitting on the sidelines a bit.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think speaking to a few buyers agents here on the Gold Coast and Brisbane, they are saying that it has sort of, the dial has moved more into a buyer's market where there's less stock turnover and they're seeing more of a vendor discount. So sellers coming in saying, I want to sell this for 1.6, but then only selling it for like 1.525 just because the interest isn't there, but they want to offload. So, but there's less stock turnover, less heat in the market. So I still say that, if it's a good time to buy, like, I mean, if I was asked the question that right now, I'd say, yeah, it is. If you're looking to invest in these sort of years where you see everything stagnate, interest rates go up, it's where a lot of people gets quite nervous. But remember, you're buying a property not for the next 2 or 3 years. You're buying it for the next 10 or 15 years. And over that time horizon, it will still do rather well if you're buying well. Buying well being the right kind of market. It's got the
Yep.
right, I suppose, basic criteria. It's in a good area. So zoom out, reassess on what the goals are if you are going to buy. But yeah, staying on the sideline waiting till sort of a bit of a recovery or interest rates come back down, that's the opposite of what you should be doing if, you've
Yep.
got good serviceability and you can invest. So
Yep.
not changing, probably the key theme around there.
Yeah, and what I would say is, I mean, look at, and you have knowledge around this, is when the government first came out with all those superannuation changes last year around,
Yep.
initially they came out wanting to tax unrealized gains in
Oh
your
God.
fund,
Yeah. Yeah.
and everyone was up in arms, which rightly so. And what was the end result of that?
Well, that got knocked back because it's just ridiculous. I think, uh, I mean, a lot of consultation went around in the industry. We thought it was ridiculous, but the flow and impact of a lot of families, especially farming families, where they've got their farms within the SMSS from years and years ago when you could transfer property, um, it'd be impossible for the agricultural industry to pay the ongoing tax on that. So went back to the drawing board. The 3 million, it starts at 3 million, but then it's indexed. They introduce another penalty tax as well. So if the amount's over 10%, you pay an extra tax on top of that. So it's a 15% tax, but then also 10% once it's over 10 mil. But now it's based on ordinary concepts of income. And
Yep.
ordinary just means you're actually realizing either a capital gain or you're receiving an actual cash dividend. It's none of this. You're going to pay tax on unrealized growth, none of that crap. So that's a little bit more in favor. But again, the 3 million and the 10 million amounts, they're indexed.
Yep.
So it does mean that most Australians won't be impacted by this for a very, very, very long time. It is mainly going to capture those very well done SMSS, which already have very high balances in them. But for the average Joe or someone that's earning good money, building their super up above $1 million, like it's not going to really hit them until they're much older later in life. And even then, it's still concessionally taxed. So it's
Yep.
still a really good outcome.
So yeah, so I guess if you apply that to here, number one, these rules still need to go through at whatever they look like. They can be altered in the future, even if they are legislated. And I think that's
Yep.
the key. If this doesn't go towards the affordability of housing and freeing up supply that they want it to do, if we're
Hmm.
not seeing material changes, then I'm sure this will be looked at and potentially tinkered with again in the future. Maybe
Yep.
something else comes in where it's making a little bit more attractive for investors in terms of
That's right.
the property market.
If they announce it in the budget, they then need to go through a period of consultation and
Yep,
then moves. If it's all there's no red flags, then it moves to forming up the legislation, and then it's actually formally legislated and receives royal assent. That can still take time, but would still need to go through the House of Reps and Senate. So there is due process, but we just want to know what the proposal is, rather than all these little drip feeding it out into the media and getting obviously the public's attention and opinion on it, rather than just give us what you're proposing so we can go
yep,
and crunch numbers and see what the long-term impact is. Absolutely.
definitely. So should we switch gears over to some questions that we've received?
Yeah, mate, that sounds good. Some good questions coming in from the listeners and clients at the moment. I'm going to flick this one because we are actually in Singapore next week.
Yes.
Um, question one. I own my former home in Melbourne, which I've been renting out since I moved to Singapore about 3 years ago. I heard the CGT changes could wipe out my exemption. Is that true?
Well, so I mean, there's a couple of things to think about here. One is the main resident exemption, which we know has already gone through, and so as a non-tax resident, that 6-year rule does not apply.
Yep, that's correct. Yep, that was moved back 30th of June 2020. So if
Yep.
you sold it as a non-resident, you would pay tax on it, absolutely. But if you're selling it when you come back, let's say you come back next year, you've only maybe rented out for 4 years, you're still covered under the main residence exemption, no issues at all. The other issue, which I think you're about to jump into.
Is around what does this CGT look like in the future. So if you were to sell whilst you're living in Singapore, assuming you're a non-tax resident, you're not available. So that current discount is not available to non-tax residents. So
Hmm.
any changes that potentially will come through in this budget does not impact non-tax residents.
Yep, yep, that's right. Uh, It will only impact you when you get back. That's all, and resume tax residency. But there'll be a bit of working there. And again, if there's grandfathering, it's going to create a very complex tax workings for accountants, to be honest. If there's discount for a
Exactly.
period and then a different type of discount and then the main residence exemption, I can see the Atlas tax team looking at this and going, this is going to be interesting. Um, here. Should I rush to buy an investment property in Australia before the May 12 budget to lock in the current CGT rules? It's a good question. I mean, we just spoke to what the property market's doing this year. It's again, these are kind of the years that the property market slows down, but it's like a really good year to still invest,
Yes,
especially if your holding period is, long term and you're trying to build your capital, build your wealth, build your assets. Um, Either way, we don't know about grandfatherings. We don't know the impact if you were to buy now versus after they announce it or after they legislate it. But if you're in the market to invest, I'd say it's still a good year to invest. If you're not
definitely.
boots on the ground, get a
Definitely.
buyer's agent to help you.
I wouldn't be buying something just on the hope that it's going to be grandfathered in and you can
Yep.
take advantage of it, because that's where you may
Yep.
end up with a bit of a lemon of an asset. Take your
Yeah.
time. If the
Yep.
right property comes up, then definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Take your time, run your numbers. Unsure, seek advice, pull the trigger, secure the asset, rent it out, lock it in. Yep.
Yep, definitely.
Um, Good question though. This is a good one. I think this is topical at the moment because seeing a few clients ask this question, but also even just around coming back to Australia tax stuff as well. I'm in Dubai earning dirhams, AED. With rates now at 4.1%, has my borrowing capacity dropped significantly since last year? So I feel like this could be two-pronged.
Yep.
I'd love for you to answer, Jeremy, around because of the Middle East conflict and then paid in dirhams, does it impact their borrowing capacity? And
Mhm.
then with interest rates going up, what has that done to borrowing capacity as well?
Yeah, so the borrowing capacity, there's two parts. Every time the rates are increased, it depends on how much debt you've got in your portfolio, but 2 to 4% is sort of the decrease in your borrowing capacity overall. So if there's a couple of increases, you could be looking at sort of 4 to 8% around that mark that it's come off. The second is the way the banks look at your living expenses. So they've increased HEM significantly over the last sort of 3 quarters, and that's
Mm.
just to track in line with the living expenses or cost of living in Australia. So that, again, if you're a high income earning family, that will mean that the banks will assume a higher living expense. So again, that will reduce your borrowing capacity. So maybe, two adults, two children, the bank may be saying your general living is going to cost you $6,000 per month. If you're spending 4,000 excluding housing, then that $2,000 difference is still going to count against your borrowing capacity. So yes, your capacity has come off, but that's across the market. That's not necessarily specific to expats. Um, the second part around, earning in the AED, well, it's pegged to the USD, or it works pretty closely. So the Aussie dollar has strengthened a bit over that period. So yes, you've had a bit of reduction in your borrowing capacity.
Hmm.
Banks are still doing calculating borrowing capacity based on your net of tax. So
Yep.
you, provided you're still earning tax-free income, you can still take that benefit from a borrowing capacity point of view. There's still a number of banks that will still apply Australian tax
Okay.
against your income. So
Mm.
you want to avoid those banks because obviously you'll have a much lower borrowing capacity. But yes, so we can still find lenders that will support that net of tax position.
Yep. Yep. Good question there. Well answered. Next question. Kind of addressed this one earlier, but I keep hearing the negative gearing cap only affects people with 3+ properties. I own 2 investment properties. Am I safe?
Safe from, yeah, safe from who, I guess, in regards to still using the negative gearing. I mean, if you're a non-tax resident, you can still claim interest on those properties and it gets carried
Mm.
forward. So if you've got two, again, the details are still very up in the air. We don't know what that looks like.
Yeah, the
Uh,
devil's in the details and we don't have them. So,
Well, yeah, and I find that really fascinating. You could have two investment properties worth $4 million each with, $6 million of lending against it, or you could have five properties with $1 million of lending.
but I
So
mean,
it,
like
it
if you even if you had 4 investment properties, what's the ATO deciding in terms of which ones you can use for tax deductions for negative gearing and which you can't? And is there a way that your losses that you can't claim on against your taxable income? Can they flow
yeah.
into another bucket such as capital losses? Capital losses are weaker than income losses, but can they flow over into another bucket so you're still getting some benefit from them? Like nothing has been noted on that. I'm probably getting a little ahead of myself there, but
But also
um,
if you've got a couple and you've got two properties in one name, two in the
yeah,
other,
yeah.
is the ATO going to look through and say you're now in a spousal relationship,
So
which
you
you,
should only
you
have
may
one
be,
each.
like Centrelink, and join them together? So do you have
Yeah,
four as a family? And then
yeah.
I guess it opens up the question around why not just look at the US tax system, and do we want to just file as a household and you have a household tax credit or tax-free threshold that you could utilize? It sort of seems
Yeah,
like we're piecemealing the tax system a little
yeah,
bit.
yeah, we are. Yeah,
Anyway, we've gone off topic on that
a little bit
answer,
off
but
piste.
I think again, I think you're okay, but we just have to watch this space on that one.
Yeah, tough one to answer at the moment. Last question for today. With all the uncertainty around capital gains tax and CGT rates, is now a good time for an expat to buy an Australian property? I feel like we've answered this question. So,
Yes.
but I mean, centering and drilling down to expat, the other one wasn't centered around an expat, but I think it's still a good time if you're trying to crack into the property market. Like these are the years when there's a slowdown, a bit uncertainty,
Yep.
where it is a really good time to invest in the property market if it's purely for an investment, growing your asset base. As an expat, a non-resident of Australia, yes, you do miss out on a lot of concessions that myself and Jeremy get because we're Australian tax residents. We can still access a discount concession up until May this year. uh, and then when we look at non-residents, they don't get the main residence exemption. You don't get the CGT discount. You also have to pay tax when you sell it, foreign resident withholding tax or capital gains withholding tax. However, just bear in mind that's just prepaying the tax. That you get the tax back if you've overpaid tax. Income tax rates about 30% on the net dollar. So probably a little bit more expensive than your traditional marginal tax rates, but they are a terrific asset to gear. We feel very happy getting a loan on a property versus, say, a margin loan on shares.
Yep.
And it's a proven formula in Australia, and it has been for the last 50 years to build real wealth. So
Yes.
it should always be part of your overarching strategy.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. Well said.
Yep. That'll do it from us today, but there's plenty coming out over the coming weeks leading into the budget. I think we are just scratching the surface of the kind of news that the governments will be feeding out as part of their May budget proposals. It'll be really good to sit in on the 12th, see what they read out to us, given everything going on, the state of the economy, the geopolitical tensions that arise from the Middle East, and where the economy's heading with inflation due to that. I really want to hear an update as to what they're also doing around the oil, diesel, jet fuel and unleaded supply in Australia, because that still hasn't been fixed. I think everyone's calling for the energy minister's resignation, but we've only held about 33 days for about 20 years. So it's been something that's been an issue before the government was even there. The Labor government, that is. That's all from me. In the meantime, if you're dropping into Singapore, can't wait to see you guys at our event on Thursday next week. In the meantime, mate, I'll let you kick on with your day, and thanks to our listeners joining in.
Thanks, James. Thanks, guys.